Can we prepare ourselves for grief? And if so, how do we prepare ourselves? Stay tuned. Hi, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I want to talk about grief. Now, I know that's not a pleasant subject, but I know it's something that we have all experienced or we will experience. Grief doesn't have to be because of a death, a loss of a loved one. Grief comes when you lose anything. Maybe your job, your marriage, a valued friendship. So grief is a part of our life that we do have to deal with. Now, right now, I am experiencing anticipatory grief, meaning I am grieving before a death, before that loss. I'm grieving just the thought of losing my ma because things are getting pretty bad. And I will give you all an update very soon, in the very near future. As you know, we now have hospice in there, and I know that the end is coming sooner than I would want it to. Grief or anticipatory grief can cause a lot of problems for our body. It can cause cardiovascular problems, sleep disruptions, digestive problems, inflammation, joint pain. It can lower our immune system, and it can put us into some bad coping mechanisms. Grief is what we think and feel on the inside, and we internalize it. It's like an inward, deep pain and sorrow that you keep to yourself. Mourning is an outward expression of grief. That's when you cry, you talk about it, you share your feelings with others, and you have to be more vulnerable in order to do that. So there really are two things that we have to do, and that's grieve and mourn. I got it way wrong the first time that I dealt with grief and the loss of a loved one. Now, of course, I've lost many people. I've lost my grandparents, and any of you that are my age, you probably lost your grandparents long ago too. We have lost parents. You could have lost siblings. God forbid a child. But there were two people in my life that I experienced grief on the highest level. They had the biggest impact on me. One I handled very poorly, and one I handled right. When my dad died 40 years ago, I did not handle that right at all. I never went through the grieving process, whatever that is, and it's different for everybody. I don't believe in that there's 5 stages to grief or 7 stages or whatever. We're all different. We're not the same. So it's a different journey for each and every one of us. Well, as I said, when my dad died, I was in total shock. I loved him to the moon and back. I absolutely adored him. And I just couldn't even face it. I took everything in. I internalized all of my feelings. I did not talk about it with anyone. I didn't face it. It was hard to even cry. It was like that shock stunned me and froze me right in that moment, and I couldn't come out of it any which way, no matter what. I was so sad, so sorrowful, and probably considered very depressed. I just went inside myself And to this day, and he's been gone, it'll be 40 years in September, I have never been to the cemetery in Pennsylvania. That's where my parents lived. I've been to Pennsylvania not even a handful of times since he died, but never did I go to the cemetery. I don't want to see the headstone. I don't want to know that it's real. I don't want to know that he's really gone. I kind of live in a pretend world in that area that he's just there, and that's why I don't see him, because he's in Pennsylvania and I'm in South Carolina. Now, is that healthy? No, absolutely not. And I would not recommend that for anyone. But it's just easier for me to think, well, I can't see him because we don't live in the same state. If I would have to look at his name on a headstone, I think the floodgates would open and all these 40 years of internalized grief would just come pouring out. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that. The other significant person that really impacted my life was my friend Billy. I've talked about her before on my channel. She died last May. It was May 17th. And after that, I had done a video on her and about her and what she meant to me. Billy's death, I handled the right way. Yes, I grieved, but I grieved internally and externally. And to this day, I still grieve the loss of my friend Billy. But where I went right was I talked about it. I allowed myself to cry at any time in front of anybody. If other neighbors on the street would walk by and mention her name or ask me how I was doing, I would just stand there and cry. I couldn't control it. I couldn't stop it. The reason I was able to handle Billy's death in the right way is because I have such a strong and solid faith now. My faith was far more immature when I was 31 and lost my dad. I was angry at God. I didn't understand. Why would he do this? Why would a man so young die and have to leave? It was immaturity. I was spiritually immature. Over these years, I have learned the gift of spiritual maturity. So this time, I relied on God. I went to him, I prayed to him, and asked for his help. Help me to understand and deal with the loss of my dear Billy, and he did. I had very many melancholy days, but every time I felt that loss, I was able to stop and look at all I had gained from knowing Billy, from having Billy in my life. So instead of looking at all the doom and gloom and loss, God showed me how to look at all she contributed to my life, all the joy she brought into my life, and what a privilege it was for me to have her in my life, even if it was just for a season. I would feel the grief on the inside, but then if I felt like crying, I would cry. I would talk to Dave. I talked to my family, my children. I told everybody what Billy meant to me. So I grieved and I mourned. That's the key, the mourning part. We have to mourn if we ever expect to heal, because grieving without mourning can be very destructive and dangerous to our physical, mental, and spiritual health. And I can certainly attest to that because of how I handled grief when I lost my dad. Now, both my dad's death and Billy's death came as a shock to me. It was not expected. My dad just left for work and dropped dead in the car of a massive heart attack while driving down the road at age 55. Billy had a lot of health issues, but I had just seen her the day before. There was no way you would have thought she was going to die, but she did. What I am facing now is with this anticipatory grief. I know that it's coming, and I can feel the grief within me. In fact, one day this week, a hospice representative was here, and she was talking to Dave and I, and she said, "I want to give you a booklet." And she said, "I want you to read this today and every single day up until the time of death, and then continue to read it every day after death for at least a year or as long as it takes." And this is the book that she handed me. It says, "Gone from my sight." That's all I had to see. And I flipped the book over. I wouldn't even look at that front page. And I have not opened that book yet. I have not looked through it. It's a thin little booklet, not many pages, but just the thought, "gone from my sight," brought to me that the time is coming that I will no longer be able to see my ma, kiss my ma, hug her, be in her presence. And as I read those words, "gone from my sight," my stomach started turning. My eyes started filling up. Already I could feel the grief. Even though nothing has happened yet, my ma is still with us and could be with us for a long time. We don't know things like that. So in the beginning of this video, when I said, can we prepare ourselves for grief? Or how do we prepare ourselves? I don't know. I just don't think we can ever be prepared, even if we know it's coming. Because the bottom line is, we are going to be enveloped in deep grief, whether we know it's coming or whether it's a shock and we didn't know it was coming. That grief is going to hit us and hit us very hard. But what I now also know is how critical mourning is to grief. And that I can prepare myself for somewhat. Meaning if I don't run away from my grief and just keep it all inside of myself, I will be able to see the same thing again. All the joys, all the memories, all that I learned from my ma. I can look at the gift that she is in my life and how very blessed I have been. Like I say about everything, it all comes down to a choice. We have to choose to mourn because we don't want to. It doesn't come easy. And we really don't want to let go of the grief. I know that sounds silly, for as painful and sorrowful as it is, but it's our way of holding on to that person. And mourning is a way of letting go. I hope that makes sense. If any of you out there have gone through this, and like I said, I'm sure you have, and you've experienced both the grieving, the internalized grieving, and the mourning, please share that in the comments below. I think it could help so many people because I know many of you have dealt with devastating losses in your life, and we're all here to help each other. So I hope this wasn't a sad or a down video, because that's not what I meant it to be. It's a hopeful video. It's a video to show myself and all of you that there is a way to heal and come out from grief, and that's through mourning, which is a very healthy process. You know, we have to go through the bad, the hard times, to get to the good, the more peaceful times. And that's what I have learned over my life. Well, now let me leave you with an inside beauty tip. My inside beauty tip today comes from two scriptures. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And then Matthew 5:4. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. These two scripture verses assures me that I can go through the process when the time comes. Sure, it's going to be difficult. No matter how much we prepare for it, we have to feel it. And we're gonna feel it. We wouldn't be human if we didn't. But we can come out of it. We can heal from it. It takes time. It's going to be different for everybody. There will be ups, there will be downs, there will be sadness, yet there will be joy. During that terrible process, we just have to remember to focus on, make the choice that we are going to look at the blessings we received from that person or that situation, from the gifts that they brought into our lives, and for all the love that they gave us. Can I sit here and say today that I am prepared? No, I'm not prepared. And I know that I won't be, because it's going to be devastating for me. But I can sit here and tell you that I will heal, and I can face it. With the help of God and His promises, I can get through it. And I know you could too. I thank you so much for being here today. I truly do appreciate it. And until we meet again, this is the old girl signing out. See ya!